You're listening to The Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell, and co-host Keelan Harvey on Alternative Talk AM 1150. Now, back to the show with local mortgage experts Tina Mitchell and Keelan Harvey.
Welcome back to The Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell.
And your co-host, Keelan Harvey.
You're a local mortgage experts right here on 1150 AM KKNW, the February 16th show. It is a great day to talk money, and that's what the show is all about, how to make money, save money so that you can have a better life for you and for your family. And if you're hearing our show at a different time or day, you are listening to a rebroadcast. But to connect with the guests that we have on the show today, please call the show at 1-855-400-1150 or go online to themoneyhour.com. And in studio right now, Troy Thiel with the Thiel Team at Windermere Yarrow Bay. Our topic today is housing affordability and the Washington housing ecosystem and updates from Olympia and addressing our challenges. Troy, so excited to have you in studio today and to have you here for the entire show because this is a really important topic that we're going to talk about today. So thank you.
Thank you.
And a little bit about Troy. With over 24 years of experience as a leader in the real estate industry, as a broker, consultant, CEO, and active participant in industry organizations, Troy knows what it takes to help the Thiel Team's clients reach their real estate goals. He has worked in 3 major marketplaces, Seattle Eastside, Madison, Wisconsin, and Chicago North Shore, and has been an award-winning sales producer and CEO in each one. Troy is a longtime industry and community leader in many areas, including government affairs regarding real estate, economic development, affordable and appropriate housing development, sustainability, business organization, bicycle and pedestrian advocate, and more. And I just want to give a shout out for that. For being a real estate agent takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, time away from family. Thank goodness his beautiful and lovely wife, Karen, the better half, works with him as well. So they get to hang out together a little bit. But all of that you do and giving back to the real estate space, which helps our real estate agents, also helps the consumers in protecting their rights and what we're going to talk about today. I just want to thank you for that, Troy, because it takes a lot of time that you volunteer to these organizations. So
I really appreciate it. It's an ethos I was taught by my parents. You know, if I am helping people pick a community to live in and housing and make a major investment in money and time and for their family, I feel it's an obligation to be involved with helping make those communities better. And I love real estate agents, as you know, and I have great friends from just about every company in any town I've ever been in.
Yeah, well, you make friends very quickly. You weren't here very long before you knew all of the people that were important to know.
Yeah, my parents always moved middle of the school year. So I learned as a little kid every year for like the first 5 years of school, I had to learn how to make friends really fast.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Don't move your kids 3 months into school every
I lived
year.
in the same city and went to the same school all the way from elementary school to junior high school. But yeah.
Well, speaking of getting connected to our guest, if you don't know Troy, you need to know him because he's not only good accolades, but he's an awesome guy and he's a whole lot of fun. So on top of a great wealth of knowledge. So we're very excited to have you here, Troy. And let's start it by talking about the how is the energy for change in Olympia this session and the housing issues. I'm really excited to get an update from you on how the fight for the good cause is going.
Mm-hmm. It's a great start so far. I would say the energy is rated excellent. It was very obvious that at the end of the last session in 2018, and there was a critical event that the Eastside Chamber of Commerce has had at the UW Bothell with 15 different state legislators, both senators and reps. And to a person, they all came back to their wards and districts and their constituents and heard, you had a nice year in Olympia, but you did nothing about housing affordability and choice. And from that meeting on, the energy has just steamrolled in the right direction among advocates, organizations, experts, think tanks like Sightline and many others to work together, which was interesting. Last year all these organizations weren't working together, and we've come together and done co-planned events. So that's been critical, I think. for the legislators to hear that, we're all on the same side on this one, because unfortunately our housing and affordability crisis, and it's a crisis. There's no way other to describe it. People want to do something about it. And, what I love about living in the state of Washington and in this area is that this is an area of innovation in so many things, right?
Yes, it is.
And one thing we're a little behind the gap is innovating on how to fix this crisis.
Yeah.
I don't think we're as behind as we were 6 months ago. I'm very happy to see legislators across both sides of the aisle in both houses working together. If you see some of the laws that are on the docket right now for fixing housing issues, the ADU bill or the Condo Liability Act, you will see a drove of representatives from throughout the state signing on as sponsors. We're going to have a big year in Olympia for a lot of our major needs for fixing, and because it's a big crisis. And it isn't just in Seattle, and it isn't just in the Eastside in Seattle or our metro area. It's affecting pretty much throughout the state. And so some of these laws that are going to be adjusted will help.
Yeah, well, and it's exciting to hear that people are coming together, because that's really the biggest challenge, is getting people to come together and work together as a team to make things happen. And if you've gotten over that hurdle, that first big step, then I can see that some great things should be moving and coming forward here for us. So, Troy, what and who are the critical drivers that are needed for the change? And we talked about, a little bit about legislation and the leaders there, but who else? Well,
the legislators themselves, they're going to solve this with our advice, consult, and experience. And there are many that have stepped to the fore. Last year, Tana Sen, who is a representative out of Mercer Island, sponsored several good bills that did not make it through. Unfortunately, no really good bills on housing challenges made it through last year. So she was a leader from the get-go. Frank Klopp, who is a representative in the Capitol Hill Central District, has been a historic housing supporter of fixes, but they've been joined by so many. I've created a nice relationship with the state legislative housing committee chair, which is Cindy Ryu, the state rep out of Shoreline, the former mayor. And Cindy gets it. Wow. She was a part of a lot of this stuff last year as well. And she had me down at the December state legislative housing committee work session day. On that committee, there's so many great leaders. Nicole Macri is also in Frank's district. She is doing great work. So many state reps are. So bravo to all of them. My new state rep, Amy Wallen, who was mayor of Kirkland, housing is one of her major issues. And, pretty much across the board, all the state legislators have housing as, if not their top priority, improving housing policy very near the top. So what's cool is to see it isn't a Democratic thing. It isn't just a Republican thing. It's, housing affordability challenges affect all of us equally, and our challenges for both parties and our communities. And that's what's great to see, is the energy of these people putting down, silly games and working together. Yeah. Other big movers, Microsoft.
Yes, right? Of course.
Wow. $500 million, a significant portion of that. The majority of that is some special loan programs, but $25 million in support to help do research and advocate and do the right thing. My industry, the Washington Association of Realtors, supported by a $750,000 grant from the National Association of Realtors that I helped lobby for. $1 million in a campaign called Unlock the Door. You've probably seen that on TV.
Yeah.
Those are not inexpensive ads. And in those commercials are people from across the board, state legislators, nonprofit housing developers. Tony Toe is awesome. He says this issue is so big, we need to throw the whole kitchen sink at it. Yeah.
Well, and it's great to see the investment that Microsoft is making, and obviously as a contributing stance to help. But it also is shows that how much Microsoft wants to be here, and the benefit to the company and the employment here. Because in order to make that work, they have to have affordable housing. Otherwise, they're going to have to have their employment somewhere else. So it's nice. I mean, it really shows that there's confidence in what we can and what we will be doing moving forward here in our market.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that. I think actually that was probably some of the initial thoughts with Amazon as they were considering their expansion, right?
Yes, of course.
Is their number one bill, so to speak, is their labor. And labor's number one bill is their housing cost. And it's not rare for me and probably you all too to have agents that you're working with talk about clients or potential clients that come out and they're thinking about taking that offer, but they see this house. They got to figure out. This house is $1.2 million, and if I'm in Fort Worth, that house is where you were just at is $400,000. And it's a pool that you can use and all that stuff. And so they might not be able to get the talent they want as a result. And so recent surveys have shown that 60% of millennials that are in Seattle are thinking of moving out of the area so they can live in a community where they can afford their first home. And that stinks. No offense to the word stink, but I don't want to offend anybody with it. But it's bad, and we can do better.
That's so exciting to see, in crisis, everybody, all this talent and all these powerful people and everybody stepping up to the plate. And it takes a crisis for a group like that to really put their heads together and push for a better cause. So it's exciting to see, even in the time we had you on the show last, what kind of process and mentality has changed on this subject a little bit. Speaking of last time you were on the show, Troy, we touched on condos. It was really interesting. I wanted to ask you about the Condominium Liability Act revision that's going, and what are the major changes that are going to help?
Well, the existing condo law now has some obvious major challenges. That's why we're not seeing condominiums except for at very high price points. And by high price points, that's cost per foot. There were a few condos announced, and they started to market, and they're not selling at $1,000 a foot for studios and small one bedrooms in Capitol Hill. $1,000 a foot.
Crazy.
They're asking people to spend $700,000 for a small one bedroom with no parking when they can rent the same unit across the street.
And they've got to do that in order to work for them because of these laws.
Yes, because the laws, unfortunately, they open up a significant liability aspect that creates expensive problems for insurance cost and out of pocket. And the insurers don't want to be here, the national insurers of condos, because they end up losing money unless they kind of hedge their bets and they raise rates a lot. And then they also cap the amount of what they'll pay, and there's a high-end deductible. So in the end, insurance doesn't cover it all, so the developer's then on the hook taking a risk, and so they have to factor in that risk. Risk is an issue, and that becomes an increase in price, and it's just a headache. So that's why we're not seeing at the lower price points. We're only seeing massive buildings, the high-rises, 188 and Nexus and Coda and First Light, because there's that efficiency of scale. If you're building 200, 300, 400 units, you can wrap that in. Now, the curveball is those units are going to be priced 15, 20, 25, 30% more than they would be normally.
Because they still have to account for that cost, that expense.
And so what's the demand curve then for them? And they're you're starting to see some juggling going, wait a minute, these aren't selling as fast, some of them. And the first few did really well, but now people are joining in. And unless they've got something special as a value proposition, that pricing is going to hurt. So, and it's going to impair some of the type of development we want. If we're pro sustainability, pro density, pro urbanization, which we are in many areas, but if you want to live in a cool country place, they're there too. So we just need to increase that kind of development and conversions too.
Yeah, so I know it's just crazy of seeing nothing happening with conversions or affordable housing in the condo market. It's just, I've never seen that before. So outside of, figuring out how they can change this laws with the liability piece of it, what other solutions are there or what problems do we need to solve around it other than that can help with our condo?
Well, the condo fixes include defining defect type, absolve, and these things are already in process and are part of the policy, these first few, and absolving the condo board from personal liability to getting sued themselves if they do it by due diligence, what they feel is an important thing. And then also, giving the developer a right to cure or fix the items rather than a right to get lawsuit. A
Okay.
lawsuit,
That makes sense.
right? Yeah. Time is money, and so those are major fixes that are already in play. The other fixes that need to happen, conversions. We mentioned conversions,
Yeah.
and we can get to this in the next section because it's critical, quite
Yes.
frankly, to the affordability piece. Is opening up with those law changes that are pretty much agreed to. Adding some conversion fixes to the current conversion law will help us supply affordable quality housing in the right locations. So.
Yeah, great. Yeah, let's pick that up. Coming up next in the Money Hour, we're going to stay right here with Troy for the entire show. Housing affordability in the Washington housing ecosystem and updates from Olympia and addressing our challenges. Again, Troy Thiel with the Thiel Team at Windermere Yarrow Bay right here on 1150 AM KKNW after the short break.
You're listening to The Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell, and co-host Keelan Harvey on Alternative Talk AM 1150. Now, back to the show with local mortgage experts Tina Mitchell and Keelan Harvey.
Welcome back to the Money Hour. This is your host, Tina Mitchell.
And your co-host, Keelan Harvey.
Your local mortgage experts right here on 1150 AM KKNW, the Saturday, February 16th show. We're here to help you build a strong financial blueprint, one show and 1 week at a time. If you're hearing our show at a different time or day, you are listening to a rebroadcast, but we're here to answer any questions or connect you with the guests that we have on the show. If you'd like to connect with our one guest today, Troy, you can call the show at 1-855-400-1150 or go online to themoneyhour.com. And our continued conversation with Troy Thiel, the Thiel Team at Windermere Yarrow Bay, housing affordability, the Washington housing ecosystem, and updates from Olympia in addressing our challenges.
So, Troy, I know we talked about conversions, and I know Tina wanted to ask you about that, but let's touch on a couple more of these fixes that potentially can solve our condo issues here. I know there's a few more.
Yeah. There's a full recipe of success on fixing our needs, and we talked about the Condo Liability Act and some of the major fixes that are already been agreed to on that, and then we want to talk about conversions, but some of those items, including upzoning where appropriate. So in Seattle, holla, right?
Yeah.
Wow, look at all those cranes.
Yeah.
We're still number one in cranes, and we're going to be for quite a while.
Yeah.
And several of the suburbs, we're here in Bellevue now. And if you go up to the Springs District, look what's happening.
Yes.
And that relationship to increasing zoning, especially around transit corridors. Train stops are really cool. I mean, look at downtown Redmond. That when people found out and developers found out that all that train was coming there, look what is happening and what has happened.
Yeah.
I'm a Chicago guy, so I'm so used to every train stop, there's high density right near that. Oh, by the way, that's really, really smart to do that. Other ways we're seeing that transit-oriented density increase in the upzoning is places where the bus rapid transit stations are going to go. So like in Kirkland, the city of Kirkland's council, they've got a special committee. How can we handle this and help solve some of our housing needs by upzoning near these stations so people can just walk to their transit and they won't need a car to join the 405 mess, let's say.
It's so interesting how the transit's come to fruition, like live, right in front of our face.
Yes.
We need to get Sound Transit back in here, by the way, too.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah.
It's it's obvious. City transit and housing, they're interrelated.
Of course.
Yes. So that's one of the fixes. Another thing that I think needs to be done and it's happening. Yesterday, the bill was dropped at committee was accessory dwelling units and improving those laws because, quite frankly, they were very limited and too limited. And the Sightline Institute and State Rep Cindy Ryu and her committee have taken a lead on that. And oh my goodness, the number of state legislators that signed on to that, it was like there were like 40 people right away. As soon as that law hit. And that's throwing the whole kitchen sink in. That's a very large liberalization of accessory dwelling units because I think it's actually fixing a problem. We talked about upzoning.
Yeah.
Seattle and all of these suburbs downzoned out 2 to 4 units about 20, 25, 30 years ago.
Really?
So notice everything you're being built is you've got 2, mid-century modern boxes smashed right next to each other.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be cool if it was a 4 unit?
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Right?
Yeah, right?
And we can do that. So the ADU fix is sort of addressing that without addressing the underlying zoning challenge.
And being able to get permits in, we're thinking now, who knows what's going to happen moving forward with my husband's mom, my mom, and we've got a beautiful huge house. I mean, it's, 4,200 square feet, and it's a gorgeous house, and it's just my husband and I. The problem is we don't have two kitchens. And, so to be able to, in some of these houses, they're building new ones, but what about existing ones and being able to add kitchens in the lower levels, which you can't now. You can't get permits for
Correct.
that.
Yeah.
And
accessory dwelling units, like you were getting at, that answers some of that. It's interesting. We have several friends who want to get out of the big house, and they want to build an ADU that they'll move to and then just sell off or rent the big house.
Yes.
Because that's
That makes sense.
right?
Yeah.
That's a major challenge. So the ADU thing is interesting. And another way to look at it is what I was referencing earlier, new construction of two big homes. What about taking down that 1,000 square foot anachronistic Rambler? Let's just say the classic Rambler, and we call them ranches in the Midwest. I could say ranch. And taking that down and building a 2-unit, a 3-unit, a 4-unit, or a house with 2 ADUs. And one of those ADUs might be yours, or you're building a 1,000 square foot new home to age in place and stay in your neighborhood. And but in order to afford to do it, you've got the 2 ADUs that are filling this affordability challenge. Downtown Kirkland. None of my service staff friends at my cafe can afford to live in downtown Kirkland. There is one project that has addressed that, but it's a major challenge, and these ADUs can help.
Yes.
And so it's once cities fix them. Los Angeles is one of the examples, and make them understandable and easier to do. That's a major one. You use the word permit too, and another challenge with our housing affordability is time is money.
Yes.
It takes 3 to 4 years to get through city halls
Yeah,
and permissions.
crazy.
And
That's crazy.
right?
Yeah.
And the markets change and costs go up
Yeah.
and you lose your contractors.
Yes.
And so I'm a big proponent. I don't know if it's going to happen in this session, but if we don't get to it, of mandating approvals. If you are, it's called, there's one phrasing called a zoning code review. If you are proposing a project that's within zoning of that site,
Approve it.
Why approve it?
Approve it, yeah.
And we're paying these city administrators, pretty good money.
Yes.
And if they approve it, and they can just move it right up the ladder.
Yes.
And we don't do that here. We're different than most places, and look what's happening.
Well, like you said before, the ease of it is that we've got examples in other states that are doing things at a very high level that have had the challenges that we've had that we can mirror after.
Yes.
And so that makes it a lot more exciting that we can figure this out. We can figure out quickly and efficiently by looking what's already working.
Yeah, and I because I've operated in some of those states that do it right, and I research this nationwide just because I'm a nerd that way. I'm a nerd in a lot of ways.
You're very passionate.
I'm passionate,
Yes.
right? Yeah, it's interesting, the Seattle ethos and the Seattle quote unquote freeze. Yeah, I feel that. They're like, well, you're not from here. Look how perfect we are. And I'm like, we're not perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, we can learn from others. It's okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think the doors are open.
Yeah.
I think people are really working hard on this, and it's going to be great.
So speaking of efficiency, what about things we talked about conversions, condo conversions on the larger scale? I mean, that's going to make a big impact and a big difference. My mom is in property management, actually, and on the building side of it, and they don't want to touch anything like that with a 10-foot pole right now. So I'm interested to see kind of where that's going to go and what that's all about.
Well, condo conversions is taking an existing building that's being used as an apartment building, obviously, and then converting the form of ownership from one single owner. That could be a REIT, it could be an investment trust, it could be you.
Yeah.
And subdividing into condo ownership. There's a lot of benefits.
Before the crisis, we saw tons of that happening.
Yes, you did. And before the crisis and before the current state law, you saw tons of it happening with one caveat. There were no consumer protections. And that created a very virile breeding pool for the legislators to be have the trial attorneys walk in and say, look, all these developers are evil and they're trying to make money off of the consumer, and look at all these amazing horror stories, unfortunately, where it was not good building and there were a lot of problems and there were no protections. And so we went from that end of the spectrum in the initial stages to the opposite extreme. And extremism in most things is never good unless you've seen my dance moves, and then they're beautiful. Sorry, a little levity every now and then. I've got the engineer laughing. That's a good thing.
Yeah, Gary's over there cracking up.
Yes. So, and so
And
we need
he's
to
very
get back.
selective in what he
Yes.
laughs to.
Yes. We'll do some Beatles numbers later. But we've got balance. We got to find balance. And the balance is the consumers need to be protected. That's number one. And the consumers are not being protected in the current phase. Why? Because they have no access to affordable housing or very little. And we have too little. And so that's the major thing to do. So the conversions fix the issue because it's already existing land use. The term NIMBY, not in my backyard, upzone. You want to upzone my neighborhood? I mean, there's people up in arms and they're ready to burn down City Hall over Holla and the 27 areas. It's already a building. It's already there. It just is what it is.
Troy, I want to ask you, I was talking to somebody and they were talking about homeowners associations, how they're just like they can do whatever they want and there's some fear with that. Is there anything to that?
I can understand that thought because, to be honest, similar to our condo laws, I don't believe homeowner associations have been trained well. And they've had a pretty bad law to deal with, but it's easy. A homeowners association, as long as the people who volunteer for it realize their number one job is to protect the investment of the association.
Yeah.
That's their number one job.
And the biggest thing that kind of makes me feel, a little bit safer if I were buying a condo is, you've got to get lending in these condos. And so lenders are, if there's a big issue, they're not going to be able to lend in it. So the things are getting reviewed by the lenders, as you know, Keelan, as we're going through the process. So before we break it to break, Troy, I want to ask you, talk a little bit about rentals and homelessness and how that's related and what's going on there.
Well, the ecosystem, and it's one system is related because if we have 200, 300,000 people in the Seattle metropolitan area. That's the range of what we're estimating of folks that would rather own where they live rather than where they rent. What that also means is we have 200,000 to 300,000 people in the rental market.
Yeah.
Competing.
That's a big number.
That's a massive number,
Yeah.
right?
Are they still having those multiple renter, on like we did the housing now? Or because I heard that slow down.
The market has changed a little bit, but location
of
works in rent, rental as well. And then there was a recent story about how Seattle's in the top 3 for wealthy renters. People who've chosen not to buy because there's no options for them. And that could be an $800,000 or $600,000 condo or a house for $1 million.
That's just crazy to even think about that. Yeah.
Right. And so what it does is, it's like a sausage factory. At the top at the top end, if you have that added supply that you shouldn't be having, it'll push down, it'll raise rents all the way down. And at the bottom, people get pushed out into homelessness. That's kind of the long answer on the homelessness issue. Zillow did a study. Their local people, they estimated that 90% of the people on the street that are homeless are, and I think it's a little high. Some of their estimates. Just kidding, Spencer. Don't be mad at me. But the issue is then those people can't afford to live anywhere.
Yeah. And there's kind of again that's that balance because all the new laws came in to protect the tenants, and it was all around, especially the stuff that was happening in Seattle, which was all around homelessness, and it actually caused some uproar and some challenges there because it needs to be balanced out.
Yes, yeah. And so we lost that balance. Now, to your point about you're hearing that there's less stories about it, the reality is we talked about this before we went on the air.
Yeah.
You go to Green Lakes, those townhomes, like I've got friends, their kid who just got $125,000 a year after Benny's job with Microsoft out of college, he's got 4 roommates. And they're renting in a place in Green Lake. And so what's happened as the prices went up in the rental market, a lot of people diverted to co-sharing, renting, and then we talked also before going on about co-living situations, and you're starting to hear more and more about that. We Live, first big major project the Selly Group is doing, along with a building they're building a We Work at 3rd and Lenora downtown. So people will find, like water finds its natural level. I think folks, even if they're making $125,000 a year, look, if I can get a sweet crib with my buddies for $500 a month, I'm going to go there.
Well, we just announced that we're going to come out with a co-op program, which is not needed as in Washington State yet, but when we're trying to deal with all of this affordability challenges may come. But they're talking about community living and building in community style as well, where you build a kitchen and a living room that everybody shares, and they all have their individual rooms. And so it's just interesting to see where is this, how is the housing going to start transitioning?
Well, one thing we didn't mention about that, it's already happened in Seattle. Are you guys familiar with apartments or micro housing?
Yeah.
And so I was referencing a Kirkland project. It's called Arate. It's on Central Street, right in downtown Kirkland, by the recently closed Wendy's. I'm having
You're a big Wendy's fan.
They do have good burgers.
I'm trying to lose weight, so I'm glad it's gone. But I miss my friends that work there. They miss me every day. But anyway, just kidding. But the apartment movement or micro housing, so that's another phrase for it.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it. There's a great project that was over by Seattle U on 13th. Apartments are all over Capitol Hill. They've created some crisis, and the units are 175 to 250 square feet, and then they share a bigger kitchen or they share a recreation space. And those are really good ways to bring some affordability into the market, where people are only quote unquote spending $800 or $900 a month in rent, which is a lot of money compared to the national average. So that's so we're seeing innovation. We just need to innovate our laws.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, coming up next in the Money Hour, we're going to continue the remainder of our show, still with the housing affordability and Washington housing ecosystem, and updates on the Olympia and addressing our challenges with Troy Thiel with Thiel Team at Windermere Yarrow Bay, right here on 1150 AM KKNW after the short break.
You're listening to The Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell, and co-host Keelan Harvey on Alternative Talk AM 1150. Now, back to the show with local mortgage experts Tina Mitchell and Keelan Harvey.
Welcome back to the Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell.
And your co-host, Keelan Harvey.
Your local mortgage experts right here at 1150 AM KKNW, the Saturday, February 16th show. We bring into studio each week the best of the best experts in all areas regarding your financing, and we're here to help you in today's economy. If you're hearing our show at a different time or day, you are listening to a rebroadcast. To connect with the guests that we have on the show today, please call 1-855-400-1150. Again, that's 1-855-400-1150, or online at themoneyhour.com. Back in studio, we have Troy Thiel with the Thiel Team at Windermere Yarrow Bay, housing affordability and the Washington housing ecosystem, and also updates from Olympia on addressing our challenges.
So, Troy, when we were on break, we got into a different layer of the conversions, the condo conversions, and I would love for you to elaborate on that a little bit for our listeners.
Yeah, thanks.
We don't want to miss out on the behind-the-scenes conversation.
Oh, yeah. And so and behind-the-scenes dance moves. Is this on TV, too? Or are we being televised? We should. So real quick, one of the things Tina mentioned in the last session was asking about the rental market and the connection to conversions. And you heard that there's less competition, quite frankly, in the rental market. So guess what? There's 24,000 to 30,000 units coming online of rentals, and now apartment developers are scared because they're like, wait a minute, our demand curve is going down, our prices are going up, our numbers aren't working. It took 3 years to get through City Hall to get permits. Our numbers are off. We're actually losing money. Oh, by the way, we might own 20 condominiums buildings that are in great locations, or apartment buildings that if we converted those to condos, we could help solve the crisis, have money, and then we can build apartments and appropriate housing moving forward. And there's legislation, I didn't mention this in the legislative component of this conversation, about multifamily tax credits, where if these people build housing, the private market that we need and the market needs and our community needs to continue to grow appropriately, they'll get a tax break as long as they build another building within 12 years. And so Cindy Ryu and Tana Sen sponsored that bill last year, and now everybody wants in on that. So that's really cool. But back to conversions, I mentioned about NIMBY issues, and that's just one of you're not going to have that because it's already existing land use. The other thing that's great about conversions, they're already built in really good locations. Yeah. They're near transit, they're near services, they're near quality of life stuff that people want. So they're already built. And we want to convert tenants to homeowners. Why? For so many reasons. It makes their lives so much better. It's a major investment. It's stability for people become more connected to their community when they own. City of Seattle, homeownership, 42%. They would have to increase homeownership percentage by 50% in the city of Seattle to be average nationally.
Really?
That's how our market is skewed.
Crazy.
Well, and that answers that question even deeper about our issue of how does home ownership and homelessness and rental relate?
Of course.
And in the,
isn't it great to have numbers in those stats to really be able to know where you're at, where you stand in the nation, to see how big your problem really is.
Yeah, you're right. That's a massive one. I mean, I think I've talked to some city planners, and they sort of knew that was the range, but they were high. They didn't know that number, and I'm like, this is the challenge.
That's
right?
crazy.
This is the challenge. We need to get more people into home ownership.
This. Yes.
Because in some of these apartment buildings, remember I was mentioning all these kids that are paying X dollars or whatever that are renting with a roommate. They're making $125,000, and let's say it's Redmond, and they're paying $3,000 a month for a 2-bedroom in downtown Redmond, and that unit would come on a conversion if it was a nice 2002 building with appropriate consumer protections written into the conversion for $500,000. That'd actually be less than what they're paying out of pocket between the two of them. Plus, it'd be an asset that they own with mortgage deductibility.
Yep, all of that.
All that.
Yeah.
They'd be more connected to the community. Their roommate could stay and help them help pay their mortgage.
Yes, yeah.
And the owner of that building built that 2002 building for $125 a square foot and just sold it for $500 or $600 a square foot.
Yeah. Yep.
Look, that's good, and they've made money on that building for 20 years.
Sure.
And they can take that money and that growth with a multifamily tax credit and build another building that we need.
Yeah,
that's crazy. I just read this article about home ownership being the gateway to wealth for young people, especially.
Well, it is.
Mm-hmm.
It is, and I mean, a call to action to listeners out there: go out and figure out what it takes for you to own a home, because it's not as crazy as you think. You don't need 20% down. Call me and Tina. Call Troy. Put it all together and figure it out, because at the end of the day, there's so many people on a daily that don't think they can own a home that we talk to that have a clear path and own a home 30 days later.
Yeah, and I can so true, Keelan, and I can say personally as well. Being a homeowner I bought my home when I was 20, and it put me in a whole different frame of mind as far as what I could do myself with success, because I owned a home. And, so it gives you that sense of pride and that sense of accomplishment that really helps you in all areas of your life, because you've got that stability. And so, great shout out there. Troy, are there homeowners that have renters that have extra bedrooms? And let's talk a little bit about that and where your thought process is there.
Well, it isn't just about you young people, Keelan, homeownership, because there's a lot of us old folks that are in big houses you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Touche, yeah.
We don't need the 4,000 square feet or the 3,000 square feet or even the 2,500 square feet.
Yeah.
And we want to age in place. We want to age in our community. We want to stay in our community, but we have no affordable prices. There's nowhere for us to go to. And so the estimation is very similar to the number of people that are renting that should be owning in this market, 200,000 to 300,000 of empty bedrooms in our community, because we have 100,000 plus homes that are occupied by people that would love to sell them, and they want to stay in Kirkland or their neighborhood of Seattle or wherever, Bothell or whatever, but there is nothing for them affordable to buy down to and move to.
So what's your creative thought process and how that comes together?
Well, okay, so I think the Condo Liability Act, the condo conversions, because they'd love to buy in that apartment building there, but we're old and we understand that home ownership is so key. One of the reasons why we have wealth and assets is because we're the homeowner generation.
Yes.
We're that 65-70% home ownership, and we're not really that excited about selling our house for X and then paying rent that's very large here because of our market, and watching it go right out the door every month, because we're investors too. We like the stability of investing in ourselves and paying our own mortgage rather than paying our landlord's mortgage. And so there's that synergy there. So that
makes sense.
Yeah. So like if I'm having a listing that's $500,000, half the people I see are the millennials thinking about buying their first place, and half are old farts like me and my wife, me, not my wife. I'm the old fart, wanting to downsize and have an appropriate place. And so the challenge, what it's created is our Seattle equity. A lot of the older folks who've decided to go ahead and sell and can't find a place, they're moving to some of these outskirt, really great communities like Bellingham and Anacortes and Chelan and all these amazing places in Washington State that we have. But we're now the new Californians, because we can afford so much more with that equity that we're literally creating creating dynamics within the ecosystem of those housing markets that are pricing out the locals.
Yes.
Those jobs don't pay that.
Yeah.
So there was a story about Chelan in the Seattle Times. 80% of the city of Chelan workers have moved outside of Chelan because they can't afford to live in the community that they work for.
Yeah.
That's so crazy, the ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
It affects everybody. Let's touch back on ADUs, Troy, and how that affects this exact issue we're talking about.
Well, what's interesting is that accessory dwelling units make a way for that baby boomer to maybe adjust the house that they're in, and create a rental unit. You know, Tina talked about adding a kitchen and stuff, and so the new ADU bill makes that easier to do. It removes a lot of the fees that get added on to when you do an ADU. If you're in Kirkland, for example, I was in the Strategic Housing Committee, special committee for Kirkland. Before you even put a brick in or a foundation in, you pay $64,000 in permits.
It's so crazy.
Yeah. That's the same amount you pay if you're building a $4 million home.
Yeah.
Wow.
So adjusting permits based upon that kind of challenge is one of them, or waiving them is another one. And then you can stay in your house. You know, you can help solve the problem, stay in your house. And on a city block, if one or two people adds an ADU, that's like, let's say that, and people get scared about cars and all the traffic that's going to bring. That's like one car every 24 hours or two cars. And like, you're not even going to, it doesn't change your community.
Well, pretty soon we're not going to have cars, so that won't be an issue anyways. They're all, no one's going to own a car. We're just going to have a carpool and the driveless cars. And
I don't see
fly
that
around.
I'm going to
I see it coming, and I'm excited about it.
I'm going to be using a personal jetpack. That's where I want to go.
So, Troy, let's talk about zoning and the Growth Management Act, because this is a really exciting topic, or not, depending on what changes really might be coming. So if we could figure out the Growth Management Act and actually make some adjustments to it, that could be a huge solution for us.
Yeah, the Growth Management Act is, that was written and passed a generation ago. A generation ago. And it was researched 6 or 7 years prior to that by planners, and it showed that their projections are about a quarter of our actual growth.
Yeah.
So one might suggest
some change. Finally,
it might need to have a little. Adaptation is what separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom. We should probably figure this out here too. I'm a big environmental sustainability dude though too, right?
Yeah.
So
but again, that balance.
Yeah, right. In Chicago when I was there during the boom, I was the first kind of leader in the industry that worked with development, saying, "Look, stop building condos." So it's interesting. I'm over here now, and I'm saying, a generation later saying, almost 20 years later saying, build condos. There I was saying, stop building condos, because at some point you reach a threshold in anything. And so the Growth Management Act has environmental protections we need to keep aware. I mean, what makes this area so special, besides all the great companies and the great people, is I'm looking out the window here. I'm seeing mountains, right?
Yeah,
very cool. And we need to protect that because we only got one of those. So there, I understand some of that underwriting stuff. There are zoning changes. There's spot zoning. The legislators seem to be very excited about that. I think not every community wants to get more dense. Well, God bless them if they don't. So, but a lot of communities think the Growth Management Act kind of pigeons them into a certain type of development, and because of that, there's some economies of scale that don't happen, and it escalates the value or the pricing of what can actually get done. So, let's open the doors to adjusting that strategically and improving that. Let's open the doors to zoning improvements that are massive. And one that I'm thinking about is, unfortunately, retail is going is down a little bit.
Yeah.
Office development here is. How about mixed use? How about a project, like I mentioned, We Work and We Live? How about more mixed use, taking some of these great commercial retail locations, because guess what? They're on bus lines, or they're next to other services, or they're already working for that kind of thing, and there's high density residential nearby already. Let's increase that. So if you look at downtown Kirkland, I keep coming back to Kirkland because I live there and work there a lot. We have Kirkland Urban, a massive project that has been created at Central and 6th and down towards downtown, and it feels like just part of the town. And
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's going to change the downtown. In many ways, Google is rumored to be wanting to purchase it. So we've got, I think the zoning issues and the Growth Management Act are connected. All of these transit policies are connected. The best thing you can do, the most green thing you can do is reuse something you've already got or put what you need where you've already got the transit.
Yep.
And so let's improve density and development near transit-oriented development. And that's a major thing.
Yeah.
Near transit, let's improve it and increase it near job centers. Let's improve it and increase it where there's already services or other things. You know, an area I see as an ideal place to grow growth?
What's that, Trey?
Grow growth. I like that
Grow
word.
growth.
That's a great one.
Grow growth.
Grow growth.
Grow growth.
Soto.
Yeah.
You know, you can see Oz down, Columbia Center and all those amazing buildings. And if you look at the picture of the cover of Oz, the book Wizard of Oz in 1939, there's a Space Needle in the picture.
I've seen that.
Yeah, right. I'm like, and I'm thinking that was an influence by the illustrator or the designer of the Space Needle. When you can see it, you want to live there. And Soto's got bus lines, the trains go through there, light rail works. And I'm like, I'm looking at all this. Let's use this. So I lived that in Chicago in the South Loop. I lived that in Chicago in the West Loop. They're living it now in Los Angeles in the Arts Corridor. We can do this. I mean, we've got plenty of land. We just need to, change some laws to open up the doors.
So, Sean, we've got less than 60 seconds. One shout out to the listeners as we wrap up our time out today.
So. Oh, mine? Or
me?
Oh,
it's you. Less than 60 seconds.
They don't want to hear from me.
All right. Okay, so lots of energy. All the fixes that we need are probably not going to get done this year. I hope condo conversions are on the dais for this year because they're the fastest way to fix the issue significantly, to get more people into home ownership, which offers so many great values to those folks that go from renters to owners. There's a lot of other solutions, prefab, the zoning improvements we discussed, transit-oriented development. We can do it. It's Seattle. We know how to do stuff and get it done. We're the leader. I mean, we are the innovation economy. Let's just take it a step further and let's be the innovation housing center of our country.
Well said, Troy. Thank you so much for being here with Keelan and I today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
And this is your host, Tina Mitchell.
And your co-host, Keelan Harvey.
Signing off for the day, your local experts, mortgage experts, right here at 1150 AM KKNW. And we'll be here same time, same place next weekend. Enjoy the rest of the weekend and be careful if we have any more snow.